morning, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Cryptocurrency, a family law primer on NFTs and other digital assets. I'm Carrie Holmes, Pro Bono Director at the Harriet Buhai Center for Family Law, along with Ron Reichstein of Youngman Reichstein PLC. We're the co-chairs of the Family Law section of the Beverly Hills Bar Association.
Thank you to our program chair, Jenna Spatz from Leichter-Maroko, LLP, for helping to coordinate this evening's program. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping announcements. You will receive your MCLE certificate shortly after the program. Please take a moment to complete the survey that is included with your certificate.
We also want to mention some of our upcoming programs this summer. On July 21, we'll have part 2 of our Nuts and Bolts series, co-sponsored with the Barrister section. Part 2 is Basics of Family Law Forensic Accounting. Thanks to our section secretary, Chelsea Stevens, for her hard work putting together this year's Nuts and Bolts. And please mark your calendars for our August mini-series on the UCCJEA and UIFSA, August 18th, featuring Judge Goldberg, Al Provinciano, and Ellen Stein, giving us the UCCJEA toolkit, and an August 25th companion program on UIFSA, chaired by Jennifer Skolnick.
The Family Law section is sponsored by Soberlink, White Zuckerman, Warsofsky Luna and Hunt LLP, and our Family Wizard. Soberlink's system combines a portable breathalyzer with wireless technology. Trusted for use in child custody cases since 2011, they are the only system that combines court admissibility in all 50 states and Canada, facial recognition and tamper detection, real-time results, easy-to-read advanced reporting. Trust the experts in remote alcohol monitoring technology for your custody cases involving alcohol. White Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt provides a wide variety of resources to complete almost any project, large or small. They also provide traditional accounting and tax practice services. They invite you to contact them to discuss your specific accounting needs and learn how they can be of service to you. Our Family Wizard is a secure co-parenting platform that supports divorced or separated parents in managing the daily responsibilities of raising children. Specialized features help co-parents organize routines, share files, track expenses and payments, check in at exchanges, send messages, and more, all while thoroughly documenting their activity. And with that, we move to our program.
Welcome, everybody. This is Beyond Cryptocurrency, a family law primer on NFTs and other digital assets. My name is Ariel Leichter-Maroko. I am joined by Mike Dudas. I will let him introduce himself. I will introduce myself right now. I am a family law attorney, partner at Leichter-Maroko in Beverly Hills. I focus primarily on complex family law litigation and appeals, and I'm a certified family law specialist, and I'm very excited to present this program to you. Mike?
Allow myself to introduce myself. I'm Mike Dudas, been a technology and financial technology entrepreneur and executive for 20 years, worked at Google, Braintree, Venmo, PayPal, and currently work at a company called Paxos and work across the crypto ecosystem with companies like PayPal, Venmo, Revolut to help them provide crypto trading services to consumers.
Great. Thank you. Mike, so we're here tonight talking about NFTs. Do you want to explain what an NFT is?
Absolutely. So an NFT, NFT stands for non-fungible token. And the word fungible effectively means a US dollar is fungible because it's exchangeable for another US dollar. Non-fungible means something is effectively unique and not replaceable for something else. So tonight we'll be discussing non-fungible tokens, which are effectively pointers to assets which are unique and not exchangeable for one another, unlike things like Bitcoin, where any one Bitcoin is exchangeable for another Bitcoin, any $1 is exchangeable for another dollar. Non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, as I said, are unique and not exchangeable for any other thing. What's interesting is the non-fungible token, the token itself is actually a pointer to the actual asset. So the token is not the asset itself, it's a pointer to the asset, whether that asset is a piece of digital art, a digital trading card that is stored, either directly on a blockchain or somewhere else. And NFTs are really interesting and unique because they begin to effectively allow for unique, provable ownership of both digital and real world assets in a completely transparent way. Key features of NFTs and things that we're going to discuss during this presentation are, basically what's a smart contract? In other words, how are these tokens? How is ownership issued? How is somebody issued a token that proves ownership? How is it transferred from one person to another? How are these things, bought and sold? And we'll give you some examples. We'll talk about the actual token standard. What's exciting is there are well-established public standards that are sort of provable in the same way that, for example, diamonds are graded and in certain ways, and there are global standards for how they're evaluated. These tokens that prove ownership of unique assets also have sort of global, well-understood standards. As I mentioned, digital assets that NFTs represent are stored on blockchains. And again, we talked about non-fungibility. Next slide.
So why are we here? Why should family law attorneys care about NFTs? Well, for one, NFTs are assets, and pretty much any asset, as we know, is subject to property division in a divorce. So if somebody has an NFT, it's going to have to be characterized, valued, divided. That's the primary reason why we're here and why we care. The other reason is that NFT trading or ownership could generate income, and that income could be relevant to support and fees. You are likely to see, if you haven't seen an NFT in a case already, you are likely to encounter one in the near future for reasons that Mike will explain.
Yeah, so those reasons include one, the NFT market has exploded. So it was effectively non-existent in the first. So we've all seen there's been a massive cryptocurrency value increase cycle over the last year. In the way that there was also one of these in 2017 to 18, the collective asset class, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies, hit a peak valuation of close to $2 trillion earlier this year. It's pulled back since, but along with that, explosion in value, you have a significant number of people who have made money on cryptocurrency and are looking to put it to work in quote unquote, assets or things of value. So the NFT market has grown significantly. To the point where hundreds of millions of dollars worth of NFTs, art, again, trading cards, collectibles, online games were being transacted per month earlier this year. And this sort of hit a peak with a $69 million sale of a single piece of art by an artist named Beeple in late Q1, early Q2. And I believe it was Christie's. I can't remember Christie's or Sotheby's, but one of the major auction houses actually auctioned off a piece of his digital art. It was an interesting piece. It was a collection of basically 10,000 days worth of art that he had created, all collected into one digital piece and sold for $69 million. This has led to extreme mainstream coverage. In fact, over the last 3 to 4 months, I've been in the crypto ecosystem now for 8 years. There was more mainstream coverage of NFTs and digital art than there have been of actual like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and decentralized finance themselves. It really caught the imagination of mainstream folks. And as I mentioned, the major auction and art houses and content creators, folks like Tops and CNN and many others are getting in and creating NFTs. And so it's something that's big already and just getting started. As I mentioned, NFTs are in the news, and what's really interesting is that they're touching this notion again of digital, provable ownership of both digital assets and real world assets is touching upon a number of both existing but also new industries and ecosystems. I mentioned, the Beeple piece, which sold at Christie's, but you'll see, an example of a headline here from just yesterday or 2 days ago, where NFTs, legacy industries, and things like jewelry and watches. Folks are actually looking to tie these digital tokens and provable ownership to real world assets. And so, it's touching upon a bunch of different ecosystems. For Juneteenth, a bunch of, music labels and hip hop, luminaries released some NFTs. And then again, as I mentioned at the bottom, the first sort of original digital native series of NFT art was called CryptoPunks, and Sotheby's did an auction of CryptoPunks over the last couple of weeks. So they're all over the news, and it's causing more mainstream, normal folks to purchase these things or pay attention to. So some examples, some are silly. The one on the bottom left, it's generative art. It's called the series is called Bored Ape Yacht Club. These things are selling for anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 right now. This sort of people are using them as avatars and connecting them to their identities. That's what we would consider to be like digital native collectibles and generative art. On the bottom in the middle, digital trading cards have become a huge thing. So Topps, as I mentioned, which is a brand that we all know from our childhoods and adulthoods, but also others like the NBA have started issuing digital collectibles. They're more exciting to many people than trading cards because there's actually communities around them. You can buy, you can sell. There are Discord and chat groups where people are trading. So it's just a very novel, community-oriented, live way to make collectibles more exciting. Moving along, this is an example of a digital art, a Beeple. And then on the top, we're getting into some really interesting things where people are creating like on-chain media. So folks have created music. Euler Beats is one example of this, where people can actually purchase them and you can own the master, and then gain royalties if that music is actually used out in the real world. So many different types of art and content are being represented by NFTs. And then basically the key question is like, how do normal people interact with them? On the left, you'll see a typical Ethereum wallet, where you can typically have an in-wallet browser that you can authenticate your wallet. Your wallet holds Ethereum or another cryptocurrency. Those cryptocurrencies are, you can purchase them either in the wallet or through a centralized or decentralized exchange. Centralized exchanges include Coinbase and others. And then basically you have this wallet which is tied to your Ethereum address. And there's a good question here. How do you access the blockchain to confirm the NFT is owned by a particular buyer? From Gary Cohn. Thanks for that question. Your Ethereum address, which is kind of linked to your wallet, and this particular Ethereum wallet picks up every token and every currency that is held at that address, and then displays it in the wallet, allows you to access it. But basically, blockchains are transparent, they're public, they're accessible to anyone, and it's almost as if you had a bank account that everybody knew the account number to, and could look at it and see what was attached to that bank account. That obviously presents a host of issues, and for that reason, many folks don't actually share what their address is or what their addresses are publicly, or they have numerous addresses, and we'll get into that later in the presentation. So on the left, Ethereum wallet, how you kind of access, purchase things, and display and look at your goods and see what you own. On the right, we have an example of one of the leading NFT marketplaces, OpenSea. It's sort of the eBay for NFTs. And you'll see, there's a bunch, there's all kinds of ways and filters and searches you can do. to find the particular type of art that you are interested in, to purchase, trade, sell, or buy. Next. So for folks who, are sort of new to cryptocurrency, cryptocurrencies are, effectively tied to blockchains. So a blockchain is a ledger in the same way that your bank has a ledger of how much money you have in your account. That's a centralized ledger where you sort of trust the bank to have the correct entries, the debits, the credits, and you have these what we call trusted parties who sort of manage and debit and credit the balances according to centralized processes and instructions. Blockchains are different. They are what we call sort of decentralized or distributed ledgers. There are a number of these. Bitcoin was the original. Ethereum is the one which is predominantly used for issuance of NFTs, transfers, sales, etc. So a blockchain is a distributed ledger, and effectively you have a globally distributed group of computers that are running programs, instances. We call them nodes that confirm transactions. Okay. So basically, there's no single centralized trusted party like Citibank or Chase who is controlling the ledger and the debits and credits and transactions. You have many different computers that are confirming that these transactions are accurate, that they occurred. Okay. So this allows for decentralized confirmation of data status and transactions. And there are multiple ways, but the most common way so Bitcoin, Ethereum, which are the two largest by market cap and transaction volume blockchains, are secured is by a consensus algorithm that's called proof of work. And what that means is these computers race to solve really challenging computer problems. And the first one to solve that computer problem or that challenging math problem. And so people put tremendous computing power behind solving those problems. The first one to solve it gets what's called a block reward and earns Bitcoin or earns Ether. Okay. Once you've earned that reward, it confirms all the transactions that have happened since the last, they're called blocks. And they happen every few minutes or every less than a minute in Ethereum, every approximately 10 minutes in Bitcoin. And so, you confirm, you solve that problem, and then all the other computers out there running it, the nodes sort of broadcast that block has been confirmed, the transactions are valid, and then the next block is mined. The transactions that happen on a blockchain are, so when we think, and some of you probably own cryptocurrency, and you have what's called an address, your Ethereum address or your Bitcoin address. That's what's called your public key. And so like if I wanted you to send me, $100 worth of Ethereum, one Ether, I would give you my public key, my public address. You would send it to me. To confirm that transaction and ensure it happens, the sender has to sign the transaction with a private key. The public key is visible to anyone. The private key is the really secure part that is only visible and apparent unless it's hacked to the actual owner of that Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other address. And NFTs are one type of asset that are distributed and secured by blockchains. Okay, the other primary asset, NFTs are one. These non-fungible tokens. The primary asset is the cryptocurrencies themselves, Bitcoin and Ether. So What's really interesting about Ethereum, so Bitcoin, you've probably heard the narrative that it's sort of digital gold. It's not a programmable blockchain, or it's not easy to program. There's not an easy scripting language or computer science language that allows people to do really meaningful computer programming things. You can't run like a decentralized social network on Bitcoin, but Ethereum has, and a number of other newer blockchains have more programmability and actually allow you to do more interesting things on the blockchain, including create contracts between literally automated contracts, programmable contracts that are self-executing, that have terms directly written in lines of code, directly written into the blockchain, meaning if X happens, then Y. Okay, and so you can basically write a code that says, and I do this with my NFTs, like I am willing to sell this particular NFT for 6.5 Ether. And so if so basically that is written in code, it's on the blockchain. And if somebody else decides to take that offer, it could be anybody who sees that sort of contract sitting out there sort of broadcast, then they can purchase from me with no centralized intermediary. And I sign that transaction, as I said earlier, with my private key that I'm willing to transfer ownership of that NFT. It's really excited. It happens on a blockchain, again, with no centralized intermediary. So instead of needing, again, an auction house for me to sell something, I can literally do it directly by code. It controls the execution and these transactions. And this is where it can get, scary for a lot of people, but they're trackable. So you have like pseudonymity, but they're definitely out there and can be seen. They're transparent, and they're irreversible. So cryptocurrency, NFTs, all these things are bearer assets, similar to cash. Once I hand it to you, I don't have a claim to it anymore. Okay, so they're bearer assets. And as I mentioned, smart contracts are critical here because with NFTs, with digital assets, the transactions happen directly on a blockchain: issuance, transfer, sale, and purchase. And it's by sort of the laws of the blockchain, you can't reverse these transactions. And obviously, there's law that happens outside of the actual transaction themselves. But it's not like you have recourse to your bank to reverse something or claw money back. So, what are some NFT use cases? I showed some examples earlier, but the primary ones today are, again, non-fungible tokens. So the NFT is a pointer to pieces of art that reside on a blockchain, and I showed you some examples of them. Things like sports cards, music, gaming, a number of other collectibles, and then access. What's really interesting is people are actually selling tokens that give you access to special online communities, to the Discord, which is like an online community chat group, and actually access to real world live events. Gary Vaynerchuk, who's like a big influencer, recently did a huge NFT drop where he sold a few thousand NFTs, which gave you basically a ticket on a blockchain to attend, a conference that he's holding here in New York for the next 3 years. And I think in the future, we're pretty confident there's going to be a ton of use cases that we can't even imagine. But things like ticketing, as I mentioned, tangible assets. So the ability, somebody actually just sold an apartment on the blockchain via NFT. I'm sure there's a bunch of legal issues around that, but you're going to see real world assets being exchanged on blockchains. I have no doubt about that over the next few years. And then identity. So the ability, digital identity, and things about you, credentials, things you've accomplished, who you are, will be represented on a blockchain. So popular, types of NFTs, you have, one of one, which are unique pieces where only I own it or you own it. You have series and editions where, hey, there's 100 of this player's cards that are issued in NBA Top Shot. And so, if I get, there may be 100 or 1,000 of them. There's earned games. So you're getting basically, people in the real world today in traditional gaming, you have Fortnite and all these other games where people are paying for skins and paying money for add-ons and things like that. What's really interesting about NFT based and decentralized gaming is you actually earn real money by playing these games and spending time, and that's an emerging area. And then, as we talked about, media. I saw one question there that I have to get to. So when this digital tulip bubble burst, you foresee an increase in claims for breach of fiduciary duty? That's more of a legal question.
Oh, you said you want to handle it. Go for it.
Well, so I would argue that this isn't a digital tulip bubble. I mean, I just look at the amount of time people are spending, staring at their phones. It's not turning around. Like if we look at our kids or, look at our teens, people are spending tremendous amounts of time. So I would just, I would have a massive but I'm of course incredibly biased, but question about whether we're in an actual digital tulip bubble. I would argue, based on my experience in fintech, I was very early to it when, Venmo, I worked out when we had 30,000 users and now there's, 60 million monthly active users or more. I think it's pretty similar in terms of what we're going to see with digital gaming and digital assets. But maybe Ariel can speak to, the community property part of
Yeah,
that.
I'll address that question later. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So maybe let's just, we'll go quickly through the rest of my slides. I have a few left, but I want to give Ariel time for all of his legal part. So, how are they purchased? You can pay with digital, with fiat. People sort of frown upon that in the crypto ecosystem because that's trackable. And one interesting thing you folks should think about is many people actually purchase these assets because they want to do it out of the sight of taxation and the government and people being able to track them. But you can purchase in a number of places, and some of the most popular ones for using a credit card or using ACH and dollars. Tons, a significant amount of the volume is done through, purchasing with cryptocurrency, so Ethereum or other currencies. There's some trading that happens. As I mentioned, there's these play to earn games where you can, earn things by spending a lot of time and mining and doing interesting things. And then there's something called airdrops where, hey, if I'm a really valuable player, I'm a special person, or I've, achieved XYZ, the provider or of NFTs might airdrop it or give it to me for no value. And they're purchased in marketplaces, secondary marketplaces directly from the vendors or creators. As I mentioned, traditional auction houses are getting into this. And then, there's these groups where people, and this is where a lot of the sort of one-to-one, hey, it's not really transparent, direct transfers happen. And those are the ones that are sort of harder to track down. And lastly, so they're stored in typically centralized NFT marketplaces. So the Nifty Gateway and NBA Top Shot, they're two of the most popular NFT providers or places where you can purchase them. They're centralized. So like Nifty Gateway is owned by Gemini, a massive exchange. NBA Top Shot is a centralized company. Dapper Labs is the company behind it. It's backed by like Andreessen Horowitz and other big VCs. But I think in the true spirit of what NFTs will become, most of them are actually stored on chain, and they're, as we talked about earlier, you have your crypto wallet that you can access them, and they're stored on chain, or they're stored in what we call decentralized decentralized like IPFS. Effectively, which is a decentralized AWS or Amazon cloud service that's run by a distributed group of folks. These NFTs are not typically held on exchanges. And one quick question. So how do you attach a contract to your NFT so you participate in secondary sales? We'll get into NFT contracts. When NFTs are issued, they typically are issued depending on where they're issued and who issues them. They actually have very specific licenses attached to them and rules attached to them. And so there's actually like contractual rights and licenses Now, some aren't. Some don't come with sort of secondary sale rights, but on many of, like, for example, the centralized NFT exchanges like Nifty Gateway, the artist who issues the NFT, when you purchase from that artist, you are agreeing to a 15% fee to the artist if you sell it on. An artist, a fee to the marketplace, et cetera. So yeah, there are a number of legal terms attached to many of these NFTs as there are to traditional art. And I think, for this side, where is the NFT located? I think I talked about this earlier, but there's sort of, some are stored directly on a blockchain, but today most aren't. They're stored on either centralized or decentralized servers, or decentralized cloud services like IPFS. We're so early in the ecosystem; it's a really risky time. If you buy an NFT, again, the contracts are often bad, and you don't have the rights that you expect to the thing that you bought. And you do have some risk that, like, the thing will actually disappear. Like, if the centralized service that you purchased it on goes out of business, like the art, you might have the token, that points to the art, but the art's gone. So that has actually happened. So there's a lot of legal issues. It's very murky right now, how this stuff is going to work out. We've talked about this, but the devil's in the details. And so, yeah, we can skip that. And then, so who has the ability? So who has the ability to control, who has control over an NFT? So it's important, when you look at a specific, NFT and the asset that's represented by that token, who has the ability to buy, sell, swap it? Can one person or many control it? And what is the technology, for example, that restricts or limits somebody, from exercising control? Okay, so in a decentralized exchange like OpenSea or Rarible, theoretically, the control is not in the marketplace on who buys or sells something, but it's the control is in the wallet. So who actually holds the wallet and who controls the private key, the actual Ethereum address that has the token in it, okay, or attached to it. So the way that you can affect control is by setting up rules over that wallet. So, most people, for their, call it Ethereum or Bitcoin or, crypto wallets, just have sort of sole control over it. But many, sophisticated owners, for security purposes or for joint ownership purposes, have set up rules where more than one person controls the wallet. So, if me and my wife owned a piece of art, and it was $100,000, I couldn't unilaterally sell it. We would both need to agree, and then we would have what's called a multi-signature wallet, where we would both sign for it. And that might mean, like, tying our email address to it and clicking on our emails to validate, that transaction and then initiate it. And so there's a number of methods, and you can research these on your own: multi-signature, multi-party computation, that allow for sort of validation and control over these assets. It's very important, though, to set these rules up ahead of time. If you haven't, then, typically, one person controls it, and anything that happens after that is sort of chasing the asset and trying to gain control of it.
Thanks. So how does this tie into family law? One of the first things that we are going to deal with is fiduciary duties and the rights of management and control. So under the family code, spouses are given equal rights to manage and control community property as they would their own separate property, provided that they abide by the fiduciary duties in Family Code Section 721, which include access to records, providing an accounting to the other spouse upon request, sharing of profits and holding them in trust for the community, and disclosing material facts about the existence of assets and about their transactions, even without request. There is also a duty of care just as there would be in any other fiduciary relationship. However, unlike other fiduciary relationships, non-spousal fiduciary relationships, the prudent investor rule does not apply. So spouses are not bound by the standard of negligence when they make investment decisions. They are, however, bound by a higher standard of gross negligence or reckless conduct. And that applies to the to NFTs because it could be said that, and I think this was one of the questions, the tulip question, whether investing in an NFT is it can be grossly negligent or reckless. There are a couple cases that touched on this. One was Camgar. It obviously did not deal with NFTs. It dealt with stock options, and it had to do with the husband did a kind of bet the farm thing, put all the money in, and I believe borrowed on margin as well to invest in stock options. Part of it had some incredible gains. Part of it had some incredible losses. And the court touched on the, I don't know if the holding was actually that it was grossly negligent or reckless, but the court referenced the rule that gross negligent or reckless conduct in investing community assets can be a breach of fiduciary duty. So that's something to be careful of. Post-separation disclosures, those are basically a very ramped up version of the pre-separation disclosure requirements, not just material facts, but pretty much everything bearing on the existence, the value, the characterization of community assets or assets in which the community might have an interest. These have to be disclosed and they have to be amended and updated as events change. In the context of NFTs, which can be very volatile and values can change very rapidly. Things can get turned upside down very quickly. It may be a very busy chore to continually update the information if your client has an NFT, or at least something, an NFT of material significant value. It may be something that has to constantly be updated, or else you risk the ire of the court of the other side pressing you for why you didn't update it, why this asset that was worth $1 million is now worth $17 and vice versa. So you come into a case, you find out the other side has an NFT, and you are worried about it going up in smoke, or the other side absconding with it, or selling it, or depriving the community of its value somehow. What can you do to protect your client? There are a few options listed here. There's the general atros, and there's a few other orders you can get. I'll go through them one by one and talk about what they mean. Obviously, as we know, the atros attached to every single divorce case that you file, and they order the spouses to not transfer, sell, dispose of any assets. This would include NFTs. And if they do violate this, then they risk contempt. They can even get thrown in jail, and they certainly would piss off the judge, which most people don't want to do. But what if you're dealing with somebody who you are afraid may actually take that risk? Let's say that they have an NFT that is worth, $10 million, and the rest of the estate is worth zero or negative, or it's debt. They could leave the country and go somewhere beyond the reach of the court, beyond the jurisdiction of California, certainly, and cash in that NFT and live a pretty good life outside of the reach of the court. And the other spouse would be left holding an empty bag with nothing and no recourse. If you're afraid of that happening, then the atros are really not going to prevent it, because they don't physically prevent anything from happening. They just tell the spouse, you better not do this or else. One option that you could take, unclear whether it would work or not, is to send a letter to the NFT marketplaces and say, basically, my client is in a divorce. There is an automatic temporary restraining order that prohibits the other side from transferring, selling, disposing of NFTs. Therefore, we demand that you freeze the account of whoever right away. Sometimes this works with banks. It's unclear whether these centralized NFT marketplaces would respect or honor it, or even if they could. I guess it's worth a shot. Who knows? But don't pin your hopes on that. Next option would be Family Code Section 2045A. Unlike the ATROs, these are not automatically executing. These orders, you have to go into court and ask for it. You can ask for it on an ex parte basis, or you can ask for it on a noticed motion basis. I would strongly recommend, if you need one of these orders, that you do it on an ex parte basis, preferably with no notice. The whole reason that you need it is because you need it in an emergency to prevent the spouse from doing something bad with the NFT, which means you have no time to wait for a notice motion. And if you give them notice of this, they may take the action that you're trying to prevent in the first place. The benefit to this over ATROs is that it allows the court, it basically is the same orders, but it allows the court to issue the orders against anyone, not just the parties. So whereas the ATROs only bind to the parties and prevent them from transferring, selling, et cetera, 2045A order will be able to attach to a bank or a other financial institution or some crypto institution, for example, Coinbase, or perhaps a centralized NFT marketplace to order them to freeze accounts and prohibit the sale and transfer. Again, I don't know if this has ever been tried with an NFT marketplace. I suspect it's possible that it hasn't. This stuff is really new, but that would be something that you would probably want to get early on if you have, a really significant asset that is in the form of this. In LA County, it's kind of sometimes difficult to get ex parte orders. So make a good showing for it. It's cry and scream that the whole estate is going to be vanishing up in smoke if you don't get this, because it's so easy for anyone to transfer this, and you just need to freeze it to preserve the court's jurisdiction over the asset at issue. The problem with this is, even if you do get it, and even if it does bind to centralized marketplaces or places like Coinbase for cryptocurrency, it's not going to do anything to protect NFTs that are not held by centralized platforms. As Mike said, most of them now are held on centralized platforms, but I guess the idea behind it, the real essence of it, would be to have them, to have more and more NFTs be held in a decentralized manner, and some of them already are. If that happens, then this order is not going to help at all, because there is no institution on which to serve it. There is nobody who can freeze it. It is an open marketplace, and anybody with the public and private keys can interact and effect transfers and transactions on behalf of these wallets that hold the NFTs. The court can order temporary use, possession, and control of an NFT. It can order it to the other side. This is based on Family Code Section 2045B, so subsection B rather than A, which incorporates several of the it allows the court to make many of the orders listed in the 6320 series, and one of those in 6324 allows this kind of order. So this would require, essentially would require the operating spouse to hand over the keys to the kingdom to the other spouse, disclosing the highly sensitive information like login credentials, private keys, passphrases, which would enable the spouse who's requesting and is awarded temporary use to do whatever they want with not only the NFT, but pretty much anything in the wallet or account. As Mike mentioned, there are safeguards for this multi-sig or MPC accounts. That's something you can look into. But if you don't do that, then be prepared for or if you don't offer that as an option, be prepared for the opposing party to scream bloody murder, that there's no way that this can be done. And if there really is a lot at stake here, then they would be well advised to take it up on a writ if the court, or appeal if the court were to order a handover of the private keys, because that's kind of almost a line that I imagine nobody would ever want to cross, especially with high value assets. And it also, if the private key is handed over, it does not deprive the initial spouse, the originally operating spouse, from still accessing it. If there's one private key, just because he gives the private key to the other side does not prevent him from continuing to own, to use, possess, and operate it. So what could be done is it could be transferred to a new wallet that's accessible only by the other spouse. There is some risk of loss in the transfer due to human error and some security vulnerabilities. It's unclear whether this can be mitigated or not. There have been stories of people transferring mistakenly to the wrong wallet or to a wallet that doesn't exist, and then you lose your asset. So these are just things to kind of keep in mind. Receivership is kind of an extreme remedy that is available under the Code of Civil Procedure. It's kind of rarely granted in family law. cases, and it has some of the same problems that you would have when you grant the other spouse temporary use, possession, and control. Liquidation is another option for the court to liquidate the asset before trial. This happens sometimes with real property. If people will say that they want, the goal is to preserve the asset pending the trial, preserve the value of the community estate. You have a real property that is going into waste or that's going into foreclosure, and you want to make sure to preserve it before it actually is foreclosed. You would ask the court to order a sale. If the other side objects to it, then you have to have a mini trial. That's what the Lee versus Superior Court case, I think from the 70s, said, because it would not be fair for the court to order the sale of a trial sale of a community asset without first determining the value and scope of the rest of the estate, so that in the event things go south, the community can be adequately compensated by other assets. So as a result of this mini trial requirement, it becomes a lengthy and expensive process, which seems to obviate the purpose of liquidation in the first place as it relates to an NFT. Presumably, if you want to liquidate an NFT, the reason is going to be that, for example, it's 95% of the value of the whole community estate, and it's a volatile market, and you want to protect and preserve it from fluctuations. And so you want to sell it and put the money into another type of asset. The other spouse objects to this. So you have to file a request to liquidate, and you have a mini trial. By the time this mini trial is over, in months from now, the damage that you're expecting or trying to protect against will have already been done, presumably, because months have passed, and these things are not on the month time scale. The extreme volatility of the NFT market is on the hours and days and weeks scale. So it's questionable whether this, moving for liquidation would really help at all any of the problems that you might have in protecting the property. So once you've dealt with that, how do you find an NFT, an informal discovery? Well, we have some tools, and the same tools would, for regular assets, the same tools would apply with this. So you would subpoena credit card and bank statements and ask the other side for them as well. They would reveal, number one, they would reveal NFTs purchased directly from credit cards and bank transfers. For example, as Mike talked about, Dapper Labs, NBA Top Shot, these are direct transactions with them in fiat currency. You would be able to see that on a bank or credit card statement. The other important thing that they would reveal is they would reveal funds transferred to crypto exchanges like Coinbase. And then from Coinbase, they would then be used to purchase cryptocurrency and so forth, which comes to the next step. You would subpoena the cryptocurrency exchanges like Coinbase, and that would reveal to you, number one, all information about the user, so the spouse's account information and other details. It would reveal possible linked accounts, which may reveal accounts that you don't know about, bank accounts, and that's not necessarily crypto or NFT related, that's just an added benefit. It would reveal all the cryptocurrency purchased by the user. It would reveal the user's cryptocurrency wallet addresses. It would reveal the cryptocurrency received by the user from outside. In other words, transferred from outside wallets to the Coinbase user, and transfers from the user to outside wallets. It will not reveal who owns the wallets that were transferred from, who owns the wallets that were transferred to. It also will not reveal the transactions done in those outside wallets. However, you've already had enough information from that to show that an asset existed, a cryptocurrency asset existed, and you can then, under marriage of Margulis, I believe, you can then at least hold the other side responsible for either explaining what happened to it or being charged with the asset. So if you show that the spouse purchased $30,000 worth of cryptocurrency and transferred it out to some outside wallet, before you even go into what happened in that outside wallet, it kind of shifts the burden to the spouse that did the transfer to account for this $30,000. And if he or she doesn't do it, then he has to essentially eat it. But it would not reveal to you automatically or without further investigation what was done with that 30,000. In other words, that 30,000 could have been transferred to an outside wallet and then purchased an NFT for 30,000, which is now worth 3 million. It's possible that happened. What you've learned so far will not tell you that. You have to go further. You can also subpoena NFT marketplaces directly, Nifty, OpenSea, Rarible. It's unclear whether what this information this would reveal, if they're going to be responding to subpoenas Coinbase does respond to subpoenas. I don't know if Nifty has ever been subpoenaed before. I don't know how they would respond. But one thing that would not be helpful is subpoenaing online wallet companies. There are software companies that facilitate the use of your crypto wallets like MetaMask. It's unlikely to yield anything helpful because it's not really a company that keeps records of what users transact. It's essentially a software, it's a browser extension, and it doesn't have the ability to track users, presumably. Furthermore, the wallets are created anonymously. You don't have to give, in general, at least as of recently, you did not have to give your name, email address, phone number, any other identifying information when creating a MetaMask account, which is really just a wallet. And that has benefits and drawbacks for the user. It's impossible to recover passwords or passkeys if you lose them and you lose the backups. But to their benefit, it does add a level of anonymity. So there's bugs and features there as well. So another thing you can do is issue a document demand or try to get a turnover order for hardware wallets, which are actual, what they sound like. There's like a piece of hardware, like a flash drive, that would be a crypto wallet. These would have also evidence of the NFTs. It would hold the NFTs on them to the extent that they exist on there. But the problem with this is that spouses it's easily flouted. If somebody is not going to disclose the wallet in the first place on their disclosures, they're probably not going to be willing or eager to hand them over pursuant to a discovery order. They can say that there's, here's 2 hardware wallets that I have and not tell you about the other 12 that they have somewhere else. They're easy to hide and they're hard to identify. So that's a problem. Also, interrogatories in general, you can ask questions that you want to that will lead to the identification of these kind of assets. Now, once you have the information from discovery, where do you go from there? So you have the bank and credit card statements. You show that funds were transferred to Coinbase or some other similar institution. You show the purchase of Ethereum. You show the transfer of that Ethereum to an outside wallet, and then what? Well, then you need to analyze the blockchain. There are several sites that do this. The primary one, the most popular one, is called etherscan.io. There's a link to it on the slide. Anybody can go there. It's all public information. You plug in the address of the wallet and it will tell you all the transactions that happened there. It'll tell you when it happened. It'll tell you details about them. The problem is that most people, myself included, do not know how to read this information. I mean, I can get very basic information about it, but I don't really understand what's going on or how to trace the transactions any further than that. There are blockchain analytics companies. I don't know how useful they would be for a family law matter, but I've given the link of 3 of them: Chainalysis, Elliptic, and CipherTrace. This is what they do. They essentially trace blockchain transactions and kind of unravel them, figure out what's going on there. But you can figure out, depending on how much effort you put in or who you hire, what has been going on with these wallets and where money was transferred and what was done with it. Money, by money, I mean crypto. So you found your NFTs and you have to value them. You ideally would get an expert just like you would in any other type of asset. A home appraiser, you would have an NFT appraiser. I don't know if there are any such people yet. There are nascent but emerging analytics services, but it's unclear. I certainly don't have any recommendations for anybody who you would be able to hire for that. The metrics that they might use to evaluate, to value these assets would be some of the same traditional ones that you would use for other assets. Listed them here: market listings, floor prices, comps, burn price, and future cash flow. Some of these are unique to NFTs, and I'll go over them in a minute. There's also some kind of not unique, but peculiar factors to NFTs, like market volatility, extreme market volatility, lack of liquidity, certain transaction costs and royalties and commissions that come into play when valuing these things. Market listings would be if the NFT itself is listed for sale, that could be some measure of something. It doesn't necessarily translate to a value. If the NFT itself is not listed, there could be similar NFTs. For example, the CryptoPunks series that Mike talked about earlier. Other CryptoPunks that could be listed for sale, even though the CryptoPunks that your opposing party has are not listed for sale. You could use those as kind of benchmarks, let's just say. And then if not that, you can use the listing price of NFTs from the same artist or company. For example, if you have a Beeple NFT at issue, you can look at what other Beeples are selling for. All these are really not that reliable for a couple of reasons. Number one, the listing price does not necessarily correlate with the sale price. In fact, it usually doesn't, because the fact that it's still listed for sale means that it wasn't sold, means that there hasn't been a buyer for that yet. Also, very often people will list NFTs for unrealistically high prices with the expectation that no expectation of finding a willing buyer at that price right now, but for a couple of reasons. Number one is you listed higher, and enough people listed higher, it creates the appearance that it's actually worth more than it is, which makes people want it more and want to bid more for it. The other reason would be that you kind of want to set it and forget it. You buy something for $1,000, you list it for $40,000, and you move on with your life. If it ever gets to $40,000, you want it to be sold without you having to monitor it, and it would automatically sell at $40,000, like when Mike was talking about hard coding that into the contract. So, so for that reason, the actual listing price of an NFT or even similar NFTs is not that reliable of an indicator of the value. Floor prices is something related to market prices. It has to do with the lowest price that is currently listed for any of a series. So going back to the CryptoPunks example that Mike talked about, as of yesterday, the lowest price CryptoPunks listed for sale was 13 ETH, which is about $24,000 as of yesterday. So you can, some people might infer that if the lowest price, if the listing is $24,000 and you're dealing with another CryptoPunk, then it must be worth at least $24,000. But that's not really true necessarily, because it's just not that reliable, at least because that it hasn't sold for $24,000 and yours isn't. So even that floor price is not necessarily accurate for that specific NFT, and it certainly may not be accurate for yours. Yours may be worth less than that. It may be just that yours is not listed for sale. And it also means that, it also is of limited use when you have a series like CryptoPunks again, where there's a huge range. I mean, you have 10,000 CryptoPunks that were created. The floor right now, if you want to buy one, the cheapest you can buy it for is $24,000. But 2 weeks ago, there was one sold for $11.75 million. So if you're an appraiser and you go into court and say, I think this NFT is worth somewhere between $24,000 and $11.75 million, you haven't added any value to the case. I mean, the judge is going to look at you like, okay, well, is it $24,000 or $11.75 million? That's not really that helpful. Comps are pretty self-explanatory. They use them in all other types of non-fungible assets like real estate businesses. You look at comparable sales. The challenge is finding a sale that's actually comparable. Also accounting for the differences between these. In CryptoPunks, for example, you can find one that has a hat or doesn't have a hat, or has a bandana, or is an alien, or has a pipe, something interesting that is similar to yours. And if there's a difference, you have to account for that difference. Sales have to be extremely recent because of the extreme market fluctuations. Any sale older than a few weeks certainly is probably unreliable, maybe even a few days. And lastly, there are fluctuations in the underlying currency. So these things are often transacted in cryptocurrency. The value of the cryptocurrency itself can fluctuate, 50% within a couple of days, as vis-a-vis the dollar. So that has to be accounted for as well. Burn price, this is something that's kind of coming up more frequently. Now it's still not that much, it doesn't exist that much, but Euler Beats, which Mike mentioned, which is like an on-chain media thing, the owners of the masters can issue prints that go for a certain price based on how many there are outstanding. And the more prints there are outstanding, the higher it costs to print them. But also you get a liquidated value for burning or destroying them. So here's an example. For Euler Beats, if you own this Genesis LP01, if you own a print, one of 56 prints, you can print someone can print another one for 3.4 ETH because there are 56 outstanding. If there's 44 outstanding, they could print another one for 1.7 ETH. But if they burn it, they destroy it, they get 2.8 or 2.9 ETH back. So you can reasonably assume that the price is somewhere between 2.8 and 3.4. That seems like a pretty good indicator of value, at least for the instant moment. I mean, things can change, obviously, if someone buys one more print, and so that goes up to 56, at 57, then the print price is going to go up and the burn price is going to go up. But if you want to freeze a moment in time, you can say that the range is somewhere between those two prices, and that's pretty reliable. But the problem is you don't have burn prices for most NFTs or even fungible tokens related to them. Future cash flows. It's one of the measures of value for a lot of other types of assets is discounted future cash flows. Doesn't happen so often with NFTs, but occasionally it does. Again, with that Euler Beats example, there are the original owners, the master copy owners receive a percentage, I think 8% of each print that is printed. So that's a future revenue stream that can be valued and used to supplement other valuation methods. Again, extreme market volatility and illiquidity. Fluctuations occur in the time it would take to sell the NFT, so that has to be factored in. Other transaction costs, platform or auction fees, self-explanatory. Gas fees refers to the fact that there's a transaction cost to interact with the Ethereum blockchain, and that those are relatively small relative to the size of NFTs that you're going to be deal with if you have to deal with NFTs. In the 2 and 3 digit range. So if you're dealing with NFTs in the 2 or 3 digit range, you're probably wasting your client's money. Royalties and commissions, Mike talked about that earlier. That has to do with when the artist gets a portion of each sale going forward. So you've located your NFT, you've valued it, you want to divide it now. Do you divide it in kind? Do you buy out? What if neither of these is feasible? Dividing in kind can't really be done directly. One of the defining characteristics of, well, I don't know if it's defining, but one of the common characteristics of NFTs are that they are indivisible, in contrast to cryptocurrency, which is divisible. So like a Bitcoin can be divided into a bunch of sashes. NFTs cannot be divided directly, but there are services that have come up, like this company Niftex that's created something called fractionalized NFTs, which essentially creates shards or fractions of an NFT, which can then be traded. The NFT itself is held in a smart contract, which can be repurchased if you gather up all the shards or with some buyout clause. There are plenty of drawbacks to this. You lose control of the underlying NFT. There's erosion of the value of the NFT, possibly. Maybe people don't want to own 1/10 of a Beeple. They want to own the Beeple. So 1/10 of the Beeple may be worth less than 1/10 of what the Beeple would have been worth. There's also a risk of loss or theft of the escrowed NFT if the contract for holding it in the if the smart contract is not well designed. It could be stolen or lost. There's also the risk of forced buyout because of that buyout clause. Instead of dividing in kind, you can transfer to the non-owning spouse and have them buy you out. This can be easily done, and the mechanics of it depend on how the NFT is held, if it's held in a wallet or if it's held in a proprietary platform, a centralized platform. There are costs associated with these, gas prices, as we said, hard-coded commissions and royalties and stuff that go back to the initial artist. These can usually be avoided if the asset is transferred rather than sold. If neither the division nor buyout is feasible, you can have it continue to be held by the same spouse in trust for the community. There's the same issues of management and control and theft and decision-making that we talked about when we talked about preserving the asset in the course of the divorce itself. It could also be transferred to a multi-sig or MPC wallet, which would require the signatures of both parties to transact with them. Income. This is a list of types of income that could be generated. Income, investment and trading gains, kind of pretty self-explanatory, just like with any security. Minting fees. We're talking about the Euler Beats master holders. If people print prints of that, then they would get fees for. The owners would get fees for that. There's sale proceeds if your client or the other side is an artist themselves, and they get ongoing payments for that. For NFT that they created. There's fees for platform owners, investors, DeFi fees we haven't really talked about. It's not that important here. Staking fees, essentially, if you essentially lend your digital assets to a platform and they give you an interest for that. It's usually related to fungible assets like cryptocurrency rather than NFTs. Apportionment is something we probably talked about. You probably thought about last on when you took an exam or something, but think back to Pereira Van Camp, community acquiring an interest in digital assets, even if the assets stem from separate property sources. So someone comes into the marriage with a bunch of separate property money and uses that to buy NFTs, or comes into the marriage with separate property NFTs and uses that to trade and buy more NFTs. What happens then is generally it's traced to the separate property asset and it's entirely separate property. However, if there's an extensive amount of time and effort devoted to investing and trading during the marriage, or if there's high frequency trading during the marriage, then the community might acquire an interest in that based on the community efforts contributed to the increase. Also, activist trading, people who would directly affect the value of assets of NFTs that they have by blogging, tweeting, publishing articles or videos. If they do that during the marriage, then you can make draw a direct line to efforts during the marriage causing an increase in value. The increase should be apportioned between separate and community estates. Tax implications. I'm not a tax attorney. I'll just kind of blow through this. So talk to your favorite tax guy about this stuff. But very briefly, the IRS created a little bit of a stir last year when they said that cryptocurrency is going to be treated as property rather than as currency or some other type of asset. The problem with that is that anytime you trade cryptocurrency, exchange it for another type of cryptocurrency, that becomes a taxable event. So you take Bitcoin and exchange it for Ether, that is a taxable event. You take Ether and you buy an NFT, that's a taxable event. So when you buy any asset with dollars, that's not a taxable event. It's only a taxable event based on the sale of that NFT, of the asset and how much it gained. But the actual purchase of the NFT itself becomes a taxable event. It's unclear whether the wash sale rule applies to cryptocurrency. There's some speculation that it doesn't. The IRC 475 election, that has to do with electing to treat your gains as mark to market rather than and as income rather than as capital gains, has some benefit for people who do this all the time. You can deduct your expenses, you can deduct losses, and it can be treated as regular income. You can offset it against your other income. I don't know whether it applies to cryptocurrency. I'm not sure whether it does or not. Finally, NFTs are considered collectibles. So even though when you sell an NFT and you get a gain, it's a capital gain. It's not the normal capital gains rate. It's a capital gains rate of 28% because there's a separate category of collectible capital gains rate for some reason, because the IRS loves us. So case law, very briefly, no known cases to me, at least, that deal with NFTs, and a search of Westlaw turned up nothing. So hopefully I don't find anything later and get embarrassed by that. There are relevant cases that I briefly touched upon that are applicable, maybe applicable here. Marriage of D'Souza dealt with Bitcoin. Marriage of Camguard dealt with stock options. The main takeaways from these are, number one, most important thing, disclosure is critical. If you don't do that, you can get in trouble. The husbands in both of these cases got slammed for not doing it, especially in D'Souza, ended up paying way more than half of what he gained from this as a result of the non-disclosure. And the success of it's no defense that that the investment that you didn't disclose succeeded. So you can't say, well, I didn't disclose it, but the other side made a ton of money on this, so I'm fine. That's not an excuse. Both of these cases say that. There's also no exception for gains and losses that offset each other. You can't say, well, I didn't disclose this other investment, so and it lost money, but this other investment that I didn't disclose gained money, so it's a wash. That doesn't exist. That's not an excuse. Finally, as I said, prudent investor rule does not apply, but don't be reckless because you can get in trouble. If you start investing a large portion of the community estate into very speculative assets, and I would argue that NFTs are very speculative. I'm not going to go the tulip route because I don't think that it is a tulip route, but certainly there's no indication that the current value of the market is going to be anywhere near what it is in the future. It could be much higher, it could be much less, but the fluctuations are real and they're material. And if you blow the entire community estate of several $1 million all on speculative assets like this, it can be argued, and I would argue it if I were on the other side, that it's reckless and that the other side should get shafted. Thank you very much.